Classical Music Mysteries. Frédéric Chopin. When they hear this name, many people immediately think of the revolutionary etude. In 1830, his homeland of Poland rose up against Russia, but the uprising failed. Warsaw fell. When the young composer heard the news, he poured his fury into the keyboard. The result, as the legend goes, is a masterpiece that changed music history. But fast forward to the end of his life, the word revolution would strike him again, this time with an entirely different meaning. How many people actually know this story? The year was 1848. It was a turbulent year, known in history books as the Spring of Nations. The man who once transformed a revolution into music lost his livelihood in Paris. Ironically, it was due to a real-life revolution. Today's case file is a record of a grueling 7-month journey. It took place just 1 year before Chopin's death. Why did this frail, sickly man have to cross the English Channel? And what kind of kindness was waiting for him there? Let's unravel the story of Chopin's time in Great Britain. Chapter 1. The Collapse of Parisian Society. February 1848. A poor harvest caused severe food shortages. There was a financial crisis. Citizens were angry, demanding changes to electoral laws. The spark came when political gatherings, known as the Campagne des Banquets, were banned. The people of Paris finally rose up. This was the February Revolution. After fierce street fighting, King Louis-Philippe fled to England, the monarchy collapsed, and the Second French Republic was established. Now let's look at Chopin's financial situation. At the time, Chopin didn't make a living from public concerts. Instead, he relied primarily on teaching piano lessons to the upper class. His client list was impressive. It included daughters of the wealthy Rothschild family, along with exiled Russian and Polish aristocrats. But the revolution shattered that financial foundation. Fearing the riots, some aristocrats fled Paris. Others retreated to their country estates. Even the wealthy who stayed were affected. The banking system was in chaos. People couldn't freely access their assets. Needless to say, piano lessons were no longer a priority. To make matters worse, something else happened the previous year, in 1847. He went through a final, bitter breakup with the writer George Sand. She had been his longtime partner and his emotional and practical support. First, he lost Sand. Then, the revolution took away his clients. Chopin was ravaged by illness. Standing around 170 centimeters tall, he reportedly weighed less than 45 kilograms. Frail and helpless, he was left behind in the chaotic streets of Paris. Chapter 2. The English Channel and the Broadwood Piano. Lost and destitute, a helping hand reached out to him. Her name was Jane Stirling. She was in her 40s, hailing from an old Scottish aristocratic family. She was also one of Chopin's devoted students. She arranged to rescue Chopin from the turmoil of the revolution, bringing him to her home country of Great Britain. In April 1848, Chopin escaped Paris. But arriving in London was just the beginning of a new ordeal. At the time, London was at the peak of the Industrial Revolution. The city was blanketed in thick coal smog. For Chopin, who suffered from respiratory illness, the environment was terrible. The environment may have been toxic, but Chopin himself was warmly welcomed. Why? Because the exiled French aristocrats who had fled Paris had already joined London's high society. He took up residence in upscale neighborhoods like Dover Street and St. James's Place. There, he tried to resume his life of teaching and performing. Let's pause for an interesting detail here. Throughout his life, Chopin favored French Pleyel pianos. The Pleyel action was light. It was absolutely perfect for expressing his delicate nuances and his fragile singing tone. But in London, the instrument waiting for him was different. It was a piano built by the pride of Britain, John Broadwood and Sons. Broadwood pianos were famous for their powerful volume and robust build. They had a much heavier touch and a different key depth. For Chopin, whose physical strength was failing, playing on such heavy keys must have been an incredible struggle. In May, he performed for Queen Victoria. This took place at an evening gala at Stafford House, which is now Lancaster House. But behind the scenes, Chopin was severely weakened. He was already struggling just to walk up a flight of stairs. London high society was brutal. Evening parties began at 11 p.m. and lasted to dawn. He wrote about it in a letter. "I am suffocating, but I must get dressed, have my hair done, and go out." Chapter 3. Scotland. A hell paved with good intentions. By August, the London social season was ending. Jane Stirling then invited him to rest. But this invitation would lead him into another kind of torment, a hell paved with good intentions. She invited him to her homeland of Scotland. The journey from London to Edinburgh took about 12 hours by train. The relentless vibration and thick smoke made it a punishing trip for Chopin. And what awaited him in Scotland was not rest. Instead, it was an exhausting schedule of visiting aristocratic relatives. Calder House, Keir House, Hamilton Palace. As a famous pianist, Chopin was dragged from one ancient castle to another, visiting Stirling's extended family. Scottish castles of that era were built of solid stone. Even in summer, they were chilling to the bone, plagued by fierce drafts. Step away from the fireplace, and it felt like a refrigerator. Shivering from the cold, Chopin played the piano for the gathered guests. Most of his audience had no deep understanding of music. They simply came to see the famous man from Paris. He poured out his despair in a heartbreaking letter to his friend Wojciecha Grzymały. He wrote, "They mean well, but their kindness is suffocating me." Chapter 4. A final spark and the Manchester tragedy. The greatest tragedy of this trip was on August 28, 1848. It was a concert in Manchester. The venue was the Gentlemen's Concert Hall, located right in the heart of the Industrial Revolution. It is said that an audience of 1,200 people gathered there. This would effectively become Chopin's last large-scale public concert. However, a crowd of 1,200 was disastrous for Chopin at that stage. His true magic of his piano playing thrived in the intimate space of a salon. In a massive hall, played by a desperately ill man, the sound was simply too faint. A local newspaper review at the time pointed out this mismatch with harsh clarity. His playing was delicate and refined, but we must say his style is suited for a drawing room, not a large concert hall. Still, he played. He played nocturnes, mazurkas, and ballades. It was like the final flickering flame of romantic music, struggling against the roaring tide of a new era. Later, in October, he gave another concert in Glasgow, but his physical strength was completely exhausted. On November 16th, he attended a ball for Polish refugees at the Guildhall in London. This is recorded as the final time Frédéric Chopin ever played the piano in public. He performed his final notes between glamorous dances. The crowd was still buzzing from the excitement of the ball, completely absorbed in their loud chatter. Surrounded by noise, the man who once ruled the salons of Paris quietly finished playing. It was a tragically lonely curtain call for a king. Chapter 5. Return to Paris and the End. On November 23rd, acting on his doctor's strict advice, Chopin finally left London. He returned to Paris. By the time he crossed the English Channel and reached his Parisian apartment, he had almost no will left to live. His stay in Britain lasted about 7 months. It is true that Jane Stirling's financial support saved him from total ruin. However, the price he paid for it was devastating. After returning to Paris, his old life never returned. The following year, on October 17, 1849, his life came to an end. He was just 39 years old. There are various theories about his cause of death, including worsening tuberculosis or cystic fibrosis, but one fact remains absolutely certain. The Revolution of 1848, followed by those grueling days in London and Scotland, undoubtedly hastened his decline. Epilogue: The Strength of Chopin. 1848, the spring of nations. From a historical perspective, it was the dawn of democracy. It was a year of progress when old regimes crumbled away. Yet this massive tide of history also crushed a delicate, brilliant musician. Despite everything, Chopin never closed the lid of his piano. Pushing a body that could barely stand, he walked onto the stage in Manchester. He remained Frédéric Chopin until the very end. His sound may have been faint, but it contained an iron will and the unyielding pride of an artist. Why does his music possess such profound strength beneath its delicate surface? Perhaps it is because he himself possessed a heart stronger than anyone else's. Thank you for watching. If you have your own thoughts, theories, or interpretations, feel free to share them in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. See you in the next video.